Hello, everyone, and welcome to Don't Sell Them Short, fostering social and emotional learning skills in the classroom. We're glad you're joining us today. We're going to be talking what is social and emotional development. And here we go. Oops. And how we can do that. But before we do that, I want to talk about our sponsor. Our sponsor is Blue Apple. These are projects that engage students, teach the content, and make the world a better place. Everything from project plans to real world connections to your content and collaboration options, as well as PD is embedded within these projects. So if you want to know more, please check out blueappleteacher.org. And if you're interested, you can save 20% on your next project by putting in code webinar20. So there's our agenda for today. We're going to talk about what is social and emotional learning and why it is so important, and also how do we develop these skills within our students and do so in meaningful and empowering ways. All these resources that you see today can be found on a handy hyperdoc that we have for you. If you type in that bit.ly link into your search bar, you will be able to access those. So anything you see here today, all available on that handy hyperdoc there. So why does SEL matter? Well, when you think about the skills that students need in the 21st century, this recent study that came out from the World Economic Forum pointed to 10 things, and we won't see things like calculus and those other content-specific skills on there. What we're actually seeing are things like cognitive flexibility, negotiation skills, service orientation, judgment and decision-making, emotional intelligence, being able to coordinate with others, being able to manage people, having creativity and critical thinking skills, and also knowing how to have and develop complex problem solving skills. These are all the things that they're pointing to as the most important things that employers are looking for in their employees. So right there, all those things point to social and emotional learning. Also, this year is uniquely different, simply because the pressures that were forced upon us. And I love this quote from Addressing the SEL Needs of Students During and After COVID-19. It really speaks to the issues that we're facing specifically this year. So the pressures of the global pandemic and its impact on social and emotional learning are creating an additional complex phenomenon. Many students will be found in a psychological predicament, perplexed by grief, anxiety, and confusion while searching for a sense of normalcy. This is coupled with pre-existing disparities and inequities while trying to establish ways to succeed in a different and, to some, strange way of learning. As schools anticipate the number of students needing additional support to increase, SEL must become a priority. And we see this in our classrooms this year. And we just want to point to the fact that if it matters any year, it matters this year. So having that mindset as we go into the school year is incredibly important. So what is social and emotional learning? And many of us know and have heard of it and probably have dived into it to some level. We're going to dive in hopefully a little deeper today and give you some strategies and skills that will really help you figure this out and how to do it in your classroom in practical ways. Two things I want to point you to. These are both videos that you can find on that hyperdoc, and all of this information that you see today, we're going to be talking about competencies, these 5 core competencies, and they were set forth by CASA, which is the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning. They are kind of they have founded these ideas that we're going to talk about today. And if you need any help with SEL, please reach out to this Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning. They have a great resource and lots of things for teachers to use in your classroom. So the 5 core competencies that CASA lays out is self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision-making. The 2 videos that I have just little snapshots of here are connected, like I said, in that hyperdoc, but both are short videos, and if you have a moment, I encourage you to check them out. They really spell out what SEL is and also how to do this in your classroom. So check those out. I want you to think for a moment before we jump into a lot of the strategies here. If you had to decide right now which of these core competencies is most challenging for your students, Again, those are self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision-making. If you had to decide as an educator right now, which of these is most challenging for your students? And just kind of keep that at the forefront of your mind as we go through today's webinar. And hopefully we can really help you develop these strategies within your students to make these challenges less difficult and easier to implement, ways to help your students in overcoming these challenges. So now we're going to talk about the how, and it's really important here that we think about how we can do this in not only like practical ways, but we want to make it meaningful, and we want to do it in empowering ways. So there's a couple articles I want to point you to as well that are linked within your hyperdoc. The first one is using social and emotional learning to alleviate back to school anxiety. This walks through a lot of kind of like why our students are feeling this way, why they come in with this school, this back to school anxiety, and it also gives practical ways to get them to overcome it. So that's a great article on that. Also, classrooms need the 3 R's of social emotional learning right now. This is a wonderful article that talks specifically to the pandemic, and she goes through. Wendy Turner goes through and points out ways to reconnect, recover, and also reimagine the classroom the ideal classroom. So both of those are great places to start as we look at how we can really focus our attention on social emotional learning because we know that our students need it. So that first core competency is self-awareness. And what is self-awareness? Castle defines it as the ability to accurately recognize one's emotions and thoughts and their influence on behavior. This includes accurately assessing one's strengths and limitations, and also possessing a well-grounded sense of confidence and optimism. The strategies we're going to kind of spell out today is an apology, appreciation, and awareness as one, and then a feelings and mood chart, and we like to call it no good answer, and then also the power of reflection journals. So the first one is the apology, appreciation, and awareness. This gives students a frame for discussion and helps them develop ownership when negative behavior occurs. But it can also be used just for framing up any discussion by taking away that apology and just having it as an appreciation and awareness. So here's an example of how an apology, appreciation, and awareness works. A student might say, I apologize for interrupting our math group discussion. I appreciate how my group didn't yell at me for doing so, and I recognize that I need to work on not blurting out my ideas and opinions when someone else is talking. So again, it's just a great frame for discussion. The next strategy we have are these feelings and mood charts. And if you do a Google search on these, you'll pull up so many, but these are 3 that I thought worked across the grade levels. So with really young kids, this can you feel it works nicely because it identifies the feeling, it shows what that might look like, and then it kind of lays out a scenario of when you might have felt that way and what that actually feels like. So this is a great visual for that. And then the next one is just an emoji one. How do you feel? Right, and kids can relate to this. So they just kind of pick an emotion that they're feeling. And then really the point here is to get kids to think, to answer when you ask them, how are you doing today? Or how are you feeling today? Most kids say good, and we want to steer them away from just saying good. We want to really have them identify what it is they're feeling as they go into their school day. So for older kids, we might want to use something called a mood meter. So if you look it's kind of difficult to see here, but on the left side, it's their energy level. So how are they feeling as far as their energy goes? And then on the bottom there, it's their pleasantness. So if they're really upset and their energy is high, they could identify that emotion as they're livid or enraged. But if they're kind of feeling like their energy is low and they're pretty happy and content, they're kind of feeling serene. So teaching them how they fall on this mood meter is key to getting them to really identify exactly what it is they're feeling. This next strategy, reflection journals. Now, we all know the power in getting kids to reflect in whether it's reflecting on an academic task they completed or on a behavior or something, or an emotional, having an emotional response to something. So we know that the power there, but here are a few ways to kind of help you understand the importance. It helps individuals clarify their thoughts and feelings in an organized way because they're writing it down and it's how it's coming out to them on the paper, which is important for us as teachers to look back and learn upon. So it teaches them to learn to lead, right? So they can lead their understanding and how they cope and better have a better self-understanding, knowing that knowing what it is that makes them happy or unhappy. It also can lead to reduction in stress because they're able to write out their feelings and emotions, and then it can assist in problem solving and aid in disagreements with others. So a great way to make students aware of how they're feeling. If you go to the CASEL website, there's a great resource, and I've linked it in the HyperDoc as well, but it's a lot of SEL reflection prompts that you could use with your students to kind of get them doing just that. The next core competency that we're going to talk about is self-management. So CASEL defines it as the ability to regulate one's emotions, their thoughts, their behaviors effectively in different situations. And it also includes managing stress and how they do that, controlling impulses, motivating oneself, and also setting and working toward achieving academic goals and personal goals. So some strategies to help them get there. We're going to talk checklists and rubrics. We're going to also talk student-created team operating agreements, and then also setting SMART goals. So with checklists and rubrics, we know that we can use these in a variety of ways, and most of us do. I'm going to point to a couple today. The first couple here, this ready to work checklist could be used for younger kids. Basically just having them, when they show up for a task or show up for the day, are they ready to work? So things that they can kind of self-manage. They're going to ask themselves, am I listening and following directions? Are my materials out and am I ready to learn? Is my body at a good energy level where I can get the work done? And then also asking themselves, what am I supposed to be doing right now? Are they aware of that? Do they understand what it is that's being asked of them? And are they ready to do their best? And are they focused on the task or the assignment? And then they check where they are and they add up those points. Also, another way to look at how kids self-management skills is on time, right? And this is something that even as adults we struggle with sometimes. So getting them to learn it early is really, really important. So how do they manage their time? They could work through a plan where they have to write down exactly what it is they have to accomplish and the steps it takes to get them there. And then they make a prediction on how long they think it will take them. And then after that period of time, they do a check. Did I get it accomplished in that amount of time? And if not, how long did it take me? And then they reflect on that. So they ask themselves, did I manage my time okay? Did I do an okay job? And they either say yes or no, and kind of identify ways that they could get better. They could also describe ways that they could improve. So this is just one good example that shows how to get kids thinking time management, and that's also accessible in your HyperDoc. And another way to look at it is behaviors, right? So checking their volume level when they're doing certain activities, asking if they completed their work, following directions and staying on task. Are they doing these things? Were they kind to others? Did they call out or blurt out? Or did they raise their hand to speak? And this is just a good way to check as they're completing a task if they follow these rules. And this one gives a little bit of a spectrum. So it's saying, no, I never did that, or I do that very often. That's a good way to kind of gauge where they fall in between that 0 and that 3 that you see there. And then during projects that go over a prolonged period of time, just having them self-assess on a rubric is really important. So it shows what the below standard, approaching standard, and at standard looks like specifically, and then having them rate where they fall. Just a good way to really get them to manage their time, their behavior, and whether they're ready or not to even work. This next one is student-created team operating agreements. Now, this is anytime, for example, one example would be for a project over a prolonged course, kind of what we just touched on. If there's something that students are jumping into that's going over a certain length of time, maybe it's an entire unit project, or it's maybe it's a project-based learning unit, whatever it is, and where they're having to manage themselves as a team and their self individually within that team, this is just a really good thing to have available for them. Now, this is something that they create, and that's really key because we want them to have ownership over that. So they can draw out a plan, and for older students, they could really spell it out by all the steps that it takes to get them to that end goal. Or for younger kids, it might look like this. It might just be something that the teacher writes out. They decide upon, the teacher writes it out, but then they all sign. And that's key to both of these, is that it's a contract, right? So this is how they've agreed to operate as a team. So having them all sign their name on it is saying that they agree to do these things. The next one is setting SMART goals. Now, SMART goals are specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and timely goals that students set for themselves. So when we're talking the S in SMART specific, what exactly will you be doing? Is it measurable? How will you know if you meet your goal? Is it achievable? What steps are you going to take to reach your goal? And is it relevant? What about your goal makes it important to you? And then also, is it timely? When do you want to complete your goal? So here's an example of this anchor chart that I found on the web. So not specific for that S would be, I want to make good grades. Well, that's right, very generic. How can we make that more specific? I want to have a 93% average in science, and then they also listed by the date. Measurable, something that would not be measurable. I want to make a lot of free throws, right? It's just we ask ourselves how many right after that. Well, how many free throws do you want to make? Well, I want to make 9 out of 10 free throws in tonight's game. Definitely more easily to measure. And a good question to ask there is how many, right? Attainable. If it's not attainable, it might say something like, I will make 200 free throws in tonight's game. We know that that's almost right. That's almost unheard of. So making it more attainable. I want to learn 30 new vocabulary words in the second quarter. That's an attainable goal, right? 30 new vocabulary words is probably not too difficult to do. Relevant. If it's unrelevant, I will dance around for 20 minutes to be a better reader. We know that that will not relate to reading, but may help. But here's a little more relevant goal. I will read for 25 minutes per night for 1 month to build my reading time. So, and tolerance. So that's a relevant goal. Now the last one, and this is really important, is timely. If it's not timely, I want to learn to play the piano. There's no specific time given there, but if we want to make it timely, we can say I want to learn to play Twinkle Twinkle Little Star by June 3rd. Again, this is just a great way to have actionable items that students can take to reach a goal, and it really helps them develop a kind of a road to get there, right? So, and it's very specific and actionable, and that's really important to think about when we're talking SMART goals. Now, as we move into social awareness, Castle defines this as the ability to take the perspective of and empathize with others from diverse backgrounds and cultures, to understand social and ethical norms for behavior, and also to recognize family, school, and community resources and supports that are out there to help them. So some strategies we're going to talk today. The first one is discussion mapping. The second one is how to develop empathy through fiction. And then the third one is engaging students in projects that matter. Now, this first one is called, as we mentioned, discussion mapping. And I have a quick 60-second strategy video I'm going to show you here. You can see it walks us through the steps here. What you're going to see is you're going to see them introduce the topic. You're going to see them allow the students to run the whole discussion on their own. Then the teacher's going to observe and map the discussion on paper. And then they're going to share that. She's going to share that map out with the class, and they're going to debrief. So we're going to see this in 60 seconds right now.
Is there somebody in the room that's got a burning question they'd like to start with? How do you think this changed Joshua's perspective? So discussion mapping is a way to give students a visual for the discussion that has taken place in real time. This discussion technique allows them to be able to think deeply and from several perspectives. So the first thing I do is introduce a topic that I want students to focus on. The discussion for today should be, it's entirely up to the students to keep the discussion moving. What do you guys think was the clear? In the meantime, I'm mapping that discussion. I put students on a sheet of paper, and then I literally use a pen and trace from one voice to the other.
Her biggest action was getting on the train.
So after discussion, I show students the map. Take a look at what you accomplished. And then I ask them to debrief. Write down what went well and what needs to change for next time. What does the map show us about how well we talk, how well we listen? They can see their improvement in a very real, visible way.
So that strategy again was discussion mapping. And as we can see, it can be incredibly powerful just for students to see how much they're talking or participating or how much they're not, and develops a great, within a group, it develops great social awareness too. And I want to show you just a couple examples here. So this is one way that a discussion map could look. If you have this A person here, that one who's always doing the talking, where it seems to kind of go from A to C, and then it bounces back to A, and then it goes to D, and it bounces back to A, we can see that student is kind of the one that's kind of controlling the conversation oftentimes. What we want to do is get our students to be more aware of how to have a discussion that looks a little more like this. So by giving them that visual after a discussion takes place and giving them a goal and say, you know, we want it to be less of what we just saw, more of this, it really gets students kind of sharing that stage and knowing that all participation is important. So a great strategy for self-awareness there. Also, developing empathy through fiction. Now we know that empathy is key when it comes to SEL. So what we really want to do is get kids feeling things that they may not see in real life. So one way to do that and experience things they may not experience in real life, one way to do that is through fiction books. So we are so good at this as teachers because we have, we're always putting books in our students' hands, and we really want to push this because it's so powerful when it comes to developing empathy. One study, participants took this assessment called Mind of the Eyes, and what it did is it tested people on their ability to detect and understand visual cues of other people's thoughts and emotions. And what the test revealed is that that those who were more aware of fiction authors and presumably read more, they scored higher on empathy tests. So it just goes to show the power of reading fiction books. Also engaging students in projects that matter. So we really want to make learning authentic. And not only does this help develop social awareness, but we want to show kids the importance of their role in this bigger world. So by engaging students in projects that matter, we do just that. So this project we're going to see here is a Blue Apple project called Lend a Hand. I've linked this if you're interested in learning more about any of the Blue Apple projects. They are linked on your hyperdoc. But we're going to watch this one about I won't talk too much. I'm going to play the video, and then I'll quickly mention something I want you to take away from this after. So here's the video, and this is in a 4th grade class. You'll see it play out.
So in this project, my students learned about microlending, and were able to do some real world research on people that were in need through videos and different media that was provided by Blue Apple. They learned a lot about charitable giving and were able to have a real world experience of microlending to several different people on the Kiva website.
My favorite project was giving people money and don't get about it. So she was going to make a farm for her livestock, that way they would have a shelter.
They were trying to raise money to make a greenhouse.
I ended up helping a woman who has 6 kids, and she couldn't afford a toilet, so I was helping her do that. The thing that I liked about this project was observation of intentional, because it allowed you to be creative and it allowed you to make up whatever you wanted. This project helped me learn a lot about microlending. I didn't know it existed before this project, so I think it will help a lot of people.
Let's go back to that one. There we go. So when we talk about projects that matter and getting our kids involved in projects that matter, we're building their social awareness of the world around them, right? And when we talk about empowering our students, this is one really great way to do just that. So again, check out these resources that I have for you in the hyperdoc to learn more. Now we're going to move into some relationship skills. And so this is the ability to establish and maintain healthy and rewarding relationships with diverse individuals and groups. It includes being able to communicate clearly, listen actively, cooperate, and also resist those social pressures, and negotiate conflict constructively, and also seek out help when needed and offer help when needed. So the strategies we'll talk about today to get our students there are just explicitly teaching active listening, establishing a positive classroom connection rituals or set of rituals, and then also engaging in role play. We talk about active listening. This is really difficult for students because oftentimes our students and adults alike, we listen to respond instead of listening to understand. And there's a big difference there. And so we want to get our kids to the point where they listen to understand, they pause, And then if necessary, they respond. But a response is not always necessary. So we really want to get our kids to understand what active listening looks like. So again, it's listening to understand, it's asking deeper questions as a result of what they heard. It's avoiding interruptions. It's also taking nonverbal cues. So those things that we're doing with our face, right, and our hands, taking those cues and learning how to use them as they're listening. And knowing just sometimes it's important just to slow down and pause and practice silence. Also, just training our mind to do this. This is the most difficult part, is just training all of us on how to be active listeners and not to get distracted. And also when they're listening, teaching them to withhold judgment. Remember, we're just listening to understand and then possibly thinking about ways that we can respond in appropriate ways. So the benefits is just a greater ability to communicate, right? And then also lower levels of frustration and anxiety and improve relationship skills. And again, a stronger sense of empathy. So really getting our students to learn to become active listeners. I've listed some resources in the hyperdoc for you to check out that could help your students get there as well. When we talk about establishing positive classroom connection rituals, these are things that you're doing on a regular basis, whether it's maybe you start your day with it every day, or you end your week with it, or maybe it's something that you do before you start every lesson. A couple that I want to show you today this one is called shout outs, and you guys are probably doing something similar in your classroom already, but this really it makes it so it's when you do it, your kids know you're doing it. And that's the important thing about a ritual, is that you're pointing it out. Your students they know what's happening as they go into it. So this one's called a shout out. I'll show you this one first.
Front table shout outs.
I have a shout out for Annalisa. She got to work really fast.
A shout out is a positive comment given from one peer to another. Shout outs are such an effective strategy for anyone, and you can throw them in anywhere. They're easy, they're quick. The first thing is a ding on my little chime, which gets everyone's attention. I see almost everybody. I will ask each group to give a shout out to someone that they noticed was doing a particularly good job or doing something that was difficult for them.
I have a shout out for Dear Alex because she was working really hard on her chicken.
Awesome. It's not just me as the teacher saying, you're doing well. It's a way for them to interact with each other and celebrate positivity. We notice, we focus on the things that are going well.
Shout out to Jamari because he was reading good.
So again, we call that one the shout outs. And again, like I said, you guys are probably doing this in your classroom, but just being really explicit about pointing out that that's what you're getting ready to do. Kids love that kind of thing. Another one is called the appreciation apology and aha. We'll check that one out now.
It's appreciation, apology, or aha. The closing circle activity is called the 3 A's, appreciation, apologies, and ahas. So the whole purpose is just to have some space to reflect on our day. All I want you to do is to stand around the room somewhere in a circle while we do our brief shout out. People can either identify an appreciation they have, an apology they have, or an aha, moment where it's like a light bulb moment in their head. My aha was that race is not the only part of our identity. So can we get a few people to shout out an appreciation, apology, or aha?
I want to appreciate Jonathan. He helped me kind of figure out where I wanted to go with my personal statement.
I think those types of appreciations or community recognitions can go a long way to build the bonds. That's the whole point, right? Building community.
I apologize for having my headphones in half of the time to everyone.
Thanks a lot for that, Carlos. That means a lot.
So one thing I quickly want to point out about that one, what a great way to end your day, right? Just kind of a great way to wrap up the learning you did and to recognize the importance of the input of others and building those relationships within your classroom community. So 2 great strategies there. And then the next one we're going to talk about is role play. Now, younger students, older students, and everyone in between can benefit from role-playing activities. There's a wonderful resource on SEL's, the CASEL website that I have linked for you. They're called SEL kernels. These are great kind of scaffolds. They're little cards and they're scaffolds that you can, that give you prompts on situations. And these ones that they have on the cards play out like they're real situations, but how you can work through a problem when they come up. So there's great examples on that website, but I encourage you to have your students come up with these themselves. So have a place for students to document, as if there's a conflict that arises, have them document it somewhere, and they can keep out the students' names, of course, but have them write it down and make time in your week to play, to role play. And so if there's a conflict on that list, you check it and you then make it real by having your kids act out a real conflict that happened in the classroom. Then also make it clear. So be sure everyone understands the scenario before it plays out. So, and also when you're doing that, make sure when you're doing these role play activities, make sure everyone's involved. So give everyone a job. Even the audience should be actively engaged as you're acting out these scenarios. And then the key here that really is a point of learning is to pause and discuss at the point of heightened emotional engagement. So right before that conflict happened, where it was the kind of the tip of the mountain that we like to talk about sometimes, that the heightened emotion, as a teacher, pause it there and then explicitly teach how to react appropriately. You also might want to have the kids act out how they responded, and then thinking also about replaying that scenario using a different outcome. So maybe they didn't act in an appropriate way. Well, having them react it in a way that is appropriate and guiding them along to teach them this. And what this really does is it not only does it build empathy and relationship skills, but it's conflict resolution as well. So when we really want to, we need to explicitly teach that to students, because otherwise they don't know what they don't know. So we really need to lay the groundwork for what that should look like and how that should play out. So it's a great way to do that. And again, that resource is for you on the HyperDoc. The final competency we're going to talk about today is responsible decision making. So what is it? It's the ability to make constructive and respectful choices about personal behavior and social interactions based on consideration of the ethical standards, the safety concerns, social norms, and realistic evaluation of consequences of various actions. So basically, how they manage themselves and make that decision afterwards. So, and thinking about the well-being of others in those situations. So one way to do that is through this strategy we call scale the problem. Another way is through picture plans and option walls. And then another way is just being able to reflect on the decisions that they did make. So scaling the problem. Oftentimes we see this from really little kids all the way through, but sometimes when kids don't know how to figure out a problem or how to internalize it and respond appropriately, the decision that they make afterwards is heightened or unnecessary. So we really want to get kids to understand the size of the problem, and that their reaction to that, their response to that, should fit the size of the problem. So the size of their response should fit the size of their problem. I love this visual called Scale the Problem here. It kind of lays out what is a small problem, what is a medium problem, and what is a big problem. So a small problem, will this even matter in an hour? Can I move on with my day? Can I ignore it? That's a small problem if they answer yes. A medium problem, do I need to talk to someone about this? Will I be able to move on if this isn't resolved? That would be a medium problem. And then a big problem is someone in danger? Have I tried multiple times to resolve this and it's just not working? And do I need to get an adult involved? Now, this helps them develop the response, right? So again, we want the size of the response to fit the size of the problem. Another way to look at that is how big is my problem? And they rate it from 1 to 5, where 1 is just a small problem that they could probably definitely solve on their own, where 5 is an emergency. They need to get somebody and get somebody quick. So teaching kids what that problem looks like and the proper and appropriate response is really key here. There's some resources I've linked also on the HyperDoc that can help with this too. Picture plans and option walls. Sometimes it's one thing to tell our kids or what it is they should do, as opposed to like actually showing them, right? We really want to show them and for them to see the process that they should take in response to a problem or a conflict. So providing a visual for that of what is acceptable and unacceptable is important. So one thing that we can do with even with very little kids, our emerging readers, is we can put up green choices, which means those good choices, and red choices, and just laying that out. What does that look like? So working as a team is a good choice. Using gentle hands, sharing, working hard. These are all good choices. And they're identified here as green choices. What are those choices where we're just like, oh, stop, we shouldn't do that? Those are red choices. When our body is out of control, when we're taking toys away from others, when we're leaving things on the floor, when we're not following directions. Giving them a visual for something that is something they can identify with. They can see it and understand. And by using green and red for kids, that's an easy way to kind of differentiate those two. Also, as you move up, maybe just a process, right? So when a student is making a decision, what's the process that they have to go through? So they've got to stop first and then look at the scenario, look at the situation, think about it, and then make a decision, right? So following these steps is really important. It gets students to really see that they shouldn't just react, right? That there's actually a process that they should take before a decision is made. And then maybe something like this as well, where just so they know, like when something is bothering them, some prompts that they can say or think about. So that'll make the situation a little better. So some things they can do, they can take deep breaths, or they can say, I feel mad when you, in response to something that was said to them. So just keep teaching them how to scaffold that discussion or that response when something may not go their way. And then for older kids, just being able to identify that they have to make a decision, right? Just being able to identify that, look, I've got something here I need to make a decision on, thinking about the different choices they have in that situation. And then maybe they create a pro and a con list. So what's going to happen if I do this? What are the good things that'll come out of it? What are the bad things that will come out of it? And then having them like try it out, practice it out. That kind of goes back into that role play idea. And then reflecting upon that, so that whatever decision they made, reflecting on it, was it the decision they should have made? Could they have done something differently that would have had a better response? So just another great way, a visual to give students something that they can process. And then this final one here is a responsible decision making. It's a reflection for that. So when we talk about making responsible decisions, we want kids to reflect on that decision that was made. So by having them think about a certain scenario where things could go different ways, they ask themselves these questions. What was the scenario where I had to make a choice? They can write it down. And then they could say what I could have done differently and wrote that down as well. How did I determine this was a deciding moment? So what was it that made them say, oh my goodness, I have to make a decision right now? And then writing that down as well. What choice did I make? How did I arrive at that choice? And what were the consequences of that choice? And remember, this isn't necessarily a bad thing. This is actually a really good thing. It could be something really great came of that. So, and then also, how happy am I with the outcome? Really getting them to self-assess, right? How happy are they with what happened? And then did I make the right choice? And we say right like this because was it the right choice for them, and why or why not? So this really walks them through the evaluation process of the appropriateness of their response. And it also gives students opportunities to develop and continue to demonstrate being thoughtful when they're making decisions and not just jumping in and deciding. So another great strategy for that. One thing I want us to look at now as we kind of sum up all of these strategies that we've heard today. You can see this graph here kind of lays it out as the ones that we talked about for self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision-making, and where they fell. So you can see these three up here were for self-awareness. These are for self-management. What I really want you to see, though, is how these strategies overlap. And oftentimes when we're doing professional development with schools, one thing that we do with this is we have them synthesize this and show how these overlap. And so they take some time to dive into this graph, and what we usually find comes of this is this right here, where all of these competencies and strategies work together. And that's really what we want to point out here. While we laid it out as 5 different competencies with 3 different strategies within each, all of them play an important role within each other. And we hope you were able to recognize that today as you take some time to think about it. I also want to show you one more resource that I have for you on that hyperdoc. If you're looking for specific strategies that tie to the content that work in that SEL, these strategies come from the Teacher Toolkit, and you could find that at theteachertoolkit.com. But I've connected these strategies to the specific content areas. So They're all listed here and they're linked here, but I'll also link them in your hyperdoc. If you are looking for those ways, if you're like, you know, I'm teaching social studies and I want to teach them a strategy for SEL within social studies content, you could click on either my other half, the whip around, or the classroom mingle. All of these relate to social studies specifically. Now, they could also relate to any other content area, but the way you see them in these videos that I've attached here are through those specific content areas. So please check that out. I think you'll find that incredibly useful and helpful as you're looking to incorporate SEL in your classrooms. And as we check out today, I just want you to just think right now, when thinking about implementing SEL in your classroom, what zone are you in? I hope you are. I hope you're into the green zone, and if you're not, hopefully you can check out that hyperdoc, and it'll either get you out of that blue, yellow, or red zone and into that green zone by using those strategies and resources that we have available to you there. And with that, I would just like to say thank you for joining us. Again, that is the bit.ly link to the hyperdoc. So anything that you saw today is also connected there in that resource. If you have any questions or wonderings, please don't hesitate to reach out to me, jamie.mcpherson@vaei.org. I would love to help you in any way that I can. Have a wonderful school year and know that we are here for you if you need it. Thank you.